Hi Perfume Nation! For a review of the Celine Haute Parfumerie collection, we need to understand that the fragrance line is not just an accessory to the brand, it is the personal olfactory journal. It is another sensory aesthetic format of the vision of its current artistic director. And Celine line is the representation of how Hedi Slimane sees the heritage of the Celine brand. Unlike other fashion houses where fragrance is often a licensed cash cow disconnected from the runway, Celine's current perfume line is the ground-up restoration project. Slimane wiped the state clean. Ignoring almost all of the previous Celine perfumes, he built a collection that mirrors his specific vision of Parisi's bourgeois elegance. Here's a historical primer you need to contextualize this review. The foundation: couture sportswear, the years of 1945 to 1997. The original context of Celine is crucial because Slimane's fragrance line is an attempt to revive these specific era's spirit. It was founded in 1945 by Celine Vipiana as a children's shoe business, believe it or not. By the 1960s, the brand has made a dramatic pivot toward a woman's brand that defined BCBG, bon chic, bon genre, essentially the stylish, conservative French upper class. It was practical, chic, and devoid of any avant-garde madness that was trendy in that era. You can think of the opulent, decadent femininity of Dior and Balenciaga. You can think of artistically unhinged surrealism of Schiaparelli. So the Celine, if we're thinking about culturally, aesthetically, the Celine was supposed to give you a feeling, the perception of understated, quiet luxury, as in the modern days it's usually called. Interestingly, in 1964, Celine Vipiana did release the first ever fragrance by Celine. It was called Vent Feu, in the translation that with wild wind. It was a green floral with galbanum and rose. It is now discontinued and largely forgotten, but if you think about its origins, green galbanum and rose, and remember that was 1964, way before any IFA regulations, that makes me think of somewhat spiky, austere shipper, right? Galbanum and rose, that's bitter, sour, sweet, floral, romantic. It makes me think of old school shippers, which is way brighter and way moodier than iris, quiet, powdery based, with only certain hints potentially of old school shippers in the form of a moss or cleaned up, fairly technogenically twisted patchouli maybe. I think it's an important anchor, and the only hint we get to how the original founder of Celine was, how her perception of sense of smells was fitting with her aesthetic and more visual vision for the brand. As I said, Vent Feu was discontinued and no longer available to try. Slimane's current fragrances, they are powdery, restrained, quiet, are a nod to the 1960s and 70s era of polite but luxurious French style rather than the modern trends like fruity floral, beast mode, technogenic mineral accords, or natural or synthetic oud scents. Then there was the middle era, the vacuum, 1997 to roughly 2018, olfaction-wise. To understand the impact of the current line, we need to note the absence of fragrance for nearly over a decade. LVMH acquisition played a considerable role in the fact that Celine didn't have successful fragrances, and also in the role that eventually they got their act together. So LVMH bought Celine in 1996. Michael Kors, that I didn't know before I researched this video, Michael Kors, our beloved king of modern American sportswear, at least how Gen X and millennials remember it, was an artistic director at Celine from 1997 to 2004. So he brought that American sportswear glamour to Celine. And then there was the decade-long era of Phoebe Philo, 2008 to 2018. This is old Celine in the eyes of the Gen Z and younger. This is the era beloved by fashion critics and by a cult following of Phoebe Philo's style, specifically her contributions to Celine. It was intellectual, minimalist aesthetic, something that people now assign to the Row as a brand. There were some fragrances that were released here and there, and I presume she had very little to do with them. They were rather an unfortunate and odd contrast to a cohesion and a aesthetic force field that Philo was creating at the time. So when Hedi Slimane launched the Haute Perfumerie in 2019, barely less than, I think, a year on the post of artistic director, he was not replacing a beloved recent perfume. He got a lot of flack for revamping the visual aesthetics of Celine. Hedi is mostly known for glam rock, rebellious, party type of fun, imaginative, sexy type of clothing that goes in a fairly sharp contrast with what Phoebe was known for. However, his revamp of haute perfumery was way more on point, at least in the collective subconscious of what we associate with smell, with sense, with feelings we associated with quiet luxury. His fragrances, his Celine olfactory arts are right there. It's a bullseye of what Celine is supposed to be about. And this is, I think, kind of the core of the context that we need to keep in mind when we go through the fragrances. When Hedi Slimane took over in 2019, he removed the accent from the logo, Celine to Celine, and immediately began to work on the perfume collection that was launched in 2019. And as much as Hedi Slimane has a notoriety in commercializing heritage brands, squeezing the cash out of them down to impossible revenues that he managed to create, his couture parfumeur concept views perfume as not as a merchandise, but as a belonging to a higher society stamp. He has a history of this, by the way. He created a private blend collection for Dior, to be specific, Dior Homme in 2004, which set the template for the modern high-end exclusive lines. Even though he's not a perfumer, this is a name we should all know. The aesthetic codes of the line is the powdery signature. Almost every scent in the Celine line contains a powdery notes, orris butter, iris, usually synthetic, designed to create a diaphanous veil, a patina of some kind. It compacts the smell that links back to the 60s and 70s Parisian bourgeoisie when you perceive it. And also another interesting facet of all these scents is the androgyny. Slimane famously blurs gender lines. All 11 plus scents by now in the line are unisex and categorized loosely into day, that would be Parade, Dans Paris, and night, that is Reptile, black tie, clubbing. Yet he encourages us to break the rules either way. Next, the bottle. Hedi Slimane was part of that moving force of unifying the packaging. Packaging sometimes makes or breaks the sales of a perfume line. It's not all about the juice. The bottles are rectangular, heavy glass with grand cycle molding on the sides. It is designed to feel like a heavy traditional object from the 17th century, rejecting modern minimalism. That said, I'm not sure if it's as much rejects modern minimalism as gives it more gravitas, trying to fit in and yet justify the exorbitant pricing that Celine fragrances now are sold at. And without further ado, let's talk about what's in this luxurious sampler that a subscriber sent to me for review. It took me over a year to make this review because I'll be completely honest with you. The first time I tried them and wore them, I wasn't entirely unimpressed. As the time moved on, as it always does, I started shaping some opinions, and my impressions, they've changed. They've changed. All right. Most of the time, people would be drawn to Celine, especially if you're coming not as a loyal brand customer who'll just grab something that smells good on their way out. If you're an olfactory fan, if you're an enthusiast in the perfume community, you will most likely arrive at the Celine Haute Parfumerie collection through some of their night scents. It's much easier to sell deeper, more complex gourmands or powdery scents than it is to sell fresh colognes for that type of a price tag. So we're gonna start with the fragrances that are most likely is gonna be the first point of interest, the point of entry into the Celine olfactory arts for people who are not already clients of the brand. I got all of my notes that I've been accumulating here. Let's begin. Black tie. The Slimane's interpretation of a smoking jacket. Vanilla, Orris, which is the base of all of this collection, similar to the colognes by Prada. It connects to his obsession with tailoring and rock and roll silhouettes that do actually require an unorthodox amount of knowledge about tailoring. So, a very common quote and favorite from the whole collection that people are drawn to black tie. I understand why. This is this typical Bourbon vanilla fragrance. If you ever tried, that's available in every Sephora, Kayali, Vanilla 28. It's a smokier vanilla. Also, sometimes if you can find fragrances that talk about orchid vanilla, it also goes into the same design direction. This is indeterminate, somewhat like smoked plummy effect on top of a vanilla fragrance. It's not too sweet, but it's also not too smoky. It doesn't take us all the way to by the fireplace of Maison Margiela and yada yada yada, like a more explicit smoky fragrances. This is just a hint, just a little bit of that caramelized glaze of something orchidy, smoky, some mysterious nuance on top of a pretty much generic vanilla scent. I was entirely unimpressed with this. I did not find anything unique and even less so worth the price tag, which is, what is it now? The tariff life, as we joke. Well, I guess that's a very 2025 type of a joke. $330 US. Take it or leave it. As all of this collection, as I said, it took me over a year to muscle the courage to talk about these perfumes, because this is how it started for me. I looked for reviews. A lot of people talk about black tie, clubbing perfumes, and I just was like, there's like nothing here. The king is naked. This is just very quiet, sits close to the skin. It's neither a gourmand. It's not gonna give you Tom Ford orchid line type of an effect. Like if you're really looking for a bright, somewhat smoky, very mystique, posing as a mysterious femme fatale type of a vanilla, you would go to this. You would go like, there are so many other options that give you a little bit more intrigue, a little bit more brightness, a little bit more of a gourmand appeal. This is nothing to write home about vanilla. It did not seduce me. I did not find it in any shape or form worth to be in the line. However, again, if we're talking about BCBG, quiet luxury, yeah, it has a place to be. And if you're a devoted brand lover and you're a client who just needs something that is non-invasively cute, but with a touch of mystery, you could grab black tie. They are promised an evolution into a delightful moss accord, tree moss accord, with the heart and the overall structure of orris butter and the vanilla at every stage of that dry down. I'll leave the blotter here. We'll see if we get any of the moss later on. To my memory, it was not enough for me to anchor as a mossy vanilla in this perfume, because otherwise mossy vanilla, that sounds pretty cool. If you can pull that off, that would be amazing. I didn't quite get that here. Reptile. Now we're talking. Now we have something to discuss. All right, this is the Rockstar scent. And actually, it's really worth, and I'm going to start doing it now, reading the brand's description, like how they position it in terms of its olfactory perception, what emotions and images it's supposed to evoke. Because in contrast to Lilique d'Imaginaire, this is not 10 pages long, and it's not so creatively convoluted that it's not a bit of a trip to read. If you've ever read fragrance descriptions from Lilique d'Imaginaire and some of brands of that kind, it's a trip. This one gets it to the point. All right. A beguiling and musical perfume for center stage. The olfactory twin of a stage outfit. Like a kaleidoscope of black around tree moss, featuring facets electrified by other notes. Oh, electrified. That is a key word here. There's something sharp, sparkly, and electric about this perfume. I absolutely get the most straight out of the gate with, I think, what's gonna become something of a leather note. Okay, top note is the elegance of cedar, and then the toxic and mysterious charm of leather. A mixture of a green leather, but not too much of a green/galbanum note, more like a dry, powdery, but very sharp, shiny, with a little bit of studs or glitter type of leather, with pepper trailing into the addictive musky and powdery patina. I am living for this perfume. This is easily my favorite of the whole line. Not only it has a little bit more of a sillage, it travels in space without overwhelming the people around you. It is unique. I have not sensed anything like this anytime for any considerable stretch of time in the past. This is my number one wish list from Celine's line. It's generally on pretty high on my wish list overall. The issue with moss-centric perfumes these days, that, as many of you know, moss, the natural moss as a component, is outlawed by IFRA. Not only, I think there are some issues with toxicity interactions with skin and absorption to the bloodstream of the natural moss components, but more importantly, in order to produce this aromatic ingredient naturally, you have to pretty much destroy all of the moss that exists on the planet Earth. So this is extremely not sustainable type of natural ingredient. Therefore, the big three, the big chemical holdings that exist in the world, can supply us with nearly all aromatic and flavorful and flavor ingredients. Everything that we drink, taste, smell is produced by, I would say, top 10, just 10 companies in the world. So the top three, the big four, I think the big three, big four, they came up with synthetic moss components and accords that now are used everywhere. And I gotta say, just like with molecular, I call them molecular, just like molecular irises, to me, are much more wearable and interesting and yet dimensional, so is a molecular moss. The synthetic moss accords these days have such a microscopic precision of this bitter, subtle, velvety. It's like sharp and soft at the same time. And Reptile translates that molecular moss accord like no other. It is beautiful. It is super unique. It is noticeable, but still tasteful, and it lasts a decently long time. I must say, Celine is not the beast mode type of perfumery line to begin with. So I am ranking things by longevity within the line here. Is it the same as Baccarat Rouge or Ganymede or one of those AD, Amber Max, Amber Wood, Amber something, Amber, Death type of molecules? No. It doesn't drill into your brain, and for some people it is saving grace, and for some people it is a disappointment. But this is the paragon of how molecular moss should exist in the world. Reptile. Oh, Reptile, if you wish. To be more French forward-looking. Beautiful. Leather, to me, only supports the moss accord. It sharpens and densifies it. And I definitely feel like once you start smelling them after another, you start feeling this unifying, powdery, dry, bookish DNA, this olfactory base, the mixture that they all exist on top of. Beautiful, flamboyantly restrained. A rock star at the diplomatic function type of an outfit. Beautiful. Love it. Easily top 1 or top 3 from the whole line. And the other favorite, the entrance, the beginning of curiosity about Celine in terms of perfumery is going to be Nightclubbing. Often quite an unpleasant surprise to many who go by the modern associations that we have with the word nightclubbing. And it is possibly intentional because the reference here is to the nightclubs of 70s in the 80s. While I'm getting settled into this cigarette buds and sweet something, let me read you the inspiration. A perfume for night birds fed by the memory of Parisian nights during Le Palace and Bain Douche era. Those were two legendary nightclubs in the 70s and the 80s. It's like the French version of Paris version of New York's Studio 54. And the Studio 54 was this cocaine-driven disco hedonism. These two, according to the lore of Parisian chic, were more dark, more filled with smokes and intellectual snobbery. So here, the galbanum top note immerses us in the electric atmosphere. They use electric a lot. An electric atmosphere with accents of nicotine. To my knowledge, nicotine doesn't have a smell. What this smells is cold cigarette buds. Not stale ones yet, but just a freshly finished cigarette. Ask me how I know. On a musky and addictive patina. And by addictive patina, they mean their olfactory DNA, that base accord that goes through, as far as I know, all of the perfumes in that line. That gives you this suede, powdery, bookish, dry, I wouldn't say vintagey, but slightly antique feel. It's definitely there. Somewhere between the scent of crimson velvet seats and the sensuality of the nape of a neck fragrant with vanilla. what most people will smell here is sweet something, something quiet, powdery, vanilla-ish accords with the cigarette smoke on top. It's unfortunately for me makes it a little cheaper and almost nauseating, just a little bit. Cigarette smoke plus a subtle gourmand just doesn't quite blend haute couture to my taste and to my impression, especially when you have such references as a Tally D'Orange Jasmine cigarette. There, the cigarette smoke is combined, the accord is combined with a piercing, fresh, almost romantic, light jasmine accord. And they both like make this flute melody and they just flow out there together. It's a very from you to the world type of a olfactory profile. It just flies off your skin. It's very bright, it's very rebellious, it's very in your face. You either love it or you hate it because cigarette smoke is not everybody's cup of tea. But when you layer the cigarette smoke on top of a vanilla, like nothing to write home about, powdery vanilla perfume, you get these stale, unwashed feeling. And again, maybe that is exactly what some people are after, but in the modern cultural obsession with cleanliness, this or that way, this gives me the impression of being unkept, of being not taking care of yourself, not doing well enough to take a shower. It's just something about it. It doesn't smell like sweat, but it just gives you impression of this leftover old, faded, been there, done that mixture of smells. It's like that cheerleader that peaked in high school and now is 53. It's just doesn't quite have a lure or magnetism that I hoped would be there and that they clearly were trying to create. So, interesting, yes. Sits close to the skin, yes. Not much of a longevity whatsoever. On me, it's gone. On my skin, it's gone within 15 minutes. On clothes, you'll get like a few hours. That's okay. That's not too bad. But it's, is it $300, like $350 type of a cigarette smoke? Not so sure. Now we're moving to in between the midlands of the Celine fragrance collection. We're moving away from darker, smokier vanillas and whatnot and going toward their DNA territory. I call the next group something with iris. So, Dans Paris, to me, was very reminiscent of Pure Eve of the different company. And if we look at the description of it, the promise of Paris when you are just 20 years old and feeling that like the city belongs to you. The top note exuding the suave vivaciousness of bergamot. I don't find bergamot suave, but fine. And coriander seed. Coriander to me, it's very cottage chic. Boat trip, tra-la-la-la-la. A tracking shot from a movie of Parisian facades, leaving you floating in the air. A quart of vanilla, powdery laurel blossom. Okay, so we're pretty much dealing with bergamot, coriander seed, laurel blossom accord. Not that I would know what that smells like in the wild. Musk and vanilla. All right, okay. Now I'm going to translate it to you in the language that is easier to comprehend. If you haven't tried the different company Pure Eve, you've definitely tried something with powdery, almondy, sweet accord. You can think of even Serge Lutens Louvre You can think of less sweet heliotrope by Etro, or pretty much, gosh, there's so many of those. Think almond milk, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of sugar powder, a little bit of iris powder, right? This dry, powdery, makeup-y feel, vanilla, and almondy, sweet almond milk, almondy facet to it. That's what it smells like to me. I would be hard pressed to find all of these, beside vanilla, all of these accords. Coriander seed, and I know how coriander smells. I grew up on it. And even less so laurel blossom accord. And for that, this is too timid for a 20-year-old in my view. In my view, this is more of a, okay, if you're like a femcel, maybe. If you just wildly asocial, you have your anime, you have your toys, dolls, action figures, you have your tight yet anonymous group of online friends with whom you play or play Dungeons and Dragons remotely, not in person. Some version of that. You have your weekly submissions of your fan fiction. You make straight A's, but you hate the school. Then maybe. It's just so demure, subdued, and just characterless. Its character is the absence of character, but this just undefined, demure sweetness. I would definitely pass on Dans Paris. The price tag and how hard it is to try them and how hard it is to obtain them anywhere outside of Celine boutiques just makes it absolutely not worth it. Let's move on. Next one, Le Peau Nu. This one, in sharp contrast, not in olfactory design, but rather in aesthetic, is devoted to the silver screen shows, to the queens of the daytime TV. The beautiful, the luscious stay-at-home wives of the 60s and the 70s. When we look at the description, I think the only useful part of the description is the notes, but I'll give you a bit of a quick read. 70s icons, those Parisian heroines with their movie-style elegance. Think Catherine Deneuve at her heyday of movie making. A slender yet impeccable allure, the eyes rimmed in black and the skin brushed with the velvety smooth accents of orris and rose. That's all pretty much that we need to know. More makeup-y, lipstick-like. Think how vintage moisturizers used to smell and how they used to feel. They had more buttery and more oily, more heavy type of feely smell. Together with rose, that's what you get. It is like lipstick on. Not lipstick on by Maison Margiela. That one is way too powdery. Like Lipstick Rose by Frederic Malle, but homeopathically diluted 10,000 times. This one, I would say, smells very vintagey. This is the one that... Fragrances like that, this genre, definitely is worth exploring. But then why wouldn't you go with actual vintage? You know what I mean? This is just so under-delivering in terms of silage, longevity, and depth. This is kind of like a faded echo, 1,000 times xerocoped original photograph of Catherine Deneuve rather than a freshly made one with her signature. You can find makeup-y, old school, lipsticky rose smell like this, which is way more affordable, has way more longevity, silage, and general intrigue. There are fragrances with that genre which bust size is bigger. You know what I mean? This is just doesn't have enough of for nearly $500 per bottle. Eh. The next one in like a midday iris plus something something is Bois Dormant. That one, if it's possible to have even less of a personality, this might be like we might be approaching the local minima here. Bois Dormant. Okay, let's look at the description. What do we have? Bois Dormant evokes the luxurious comfort and understated, at least they acknowledge that it is understated like the capital letters understated classic architecture of an English double-breasted flannel blazer. The day twin of black tie. This delicate woody fragrance is underscored with the bleached accents of powdery cologne. Bergamot, juniper, white orris butter, cedar, vetiver. Okay, you know, if you are spinning this to me as nude powdery cologne, that, just by the nature of olfactory design, is a mind twister. Colognes are always bright, vivacious, and again, they leave your skin very quickly. They just run into the wild. They run off of you into the air. They fill in the room and they evaporate very quickly. They're loud. Sometimes they're bright. Sometimes they're pitchy and austere and sharp. Like colognes are anything but powdery or skin or demure. But similarly, like Hermès Barania is a nude berry shipper. How is that possible? I don't know, but they have delivered. If we look at it as a powdery woody cologne that sits close to the skin, that's just a whisper, okay, that has its own intrigue, at least for those people who've been in the olfactory game for a long time. If you're a devoted fan of Celine and you shop in their boutiques frequently, you might grab this and go because you're just, I guess you're sick and tired of the stinky, insane concoctions that are sold in department stores, and yet you're underwhelmed and tired with Glacier U or Juliette Has a Gun Not a Perfume or other Not a Perfume perfumes. This can be like a cool, as I say, understated classicism in a modern, very like whispery, subdued version type of a scent you could wear every day, and just like you can bathe in it, forget about it, and it's gonna be fine. You're not gonna intrude on anyone with this fragrance, even if you bathe in it, I dare say. That said, it's just nothing of a perfume. It's neither super irisy, it's neither and also not woody. It just has no character whatsoever. And when it comes to skin tight nude colognes, I would prefer Nicolai Parfumeur Le Mixed. That, if there is a better nude cologne, please let me know, because that one is just divine as a nude cologne. Again, I know it's a logical non sequitur in yet. This, again, we're talking about over $300, and then you add taxes to that, and it's just gonna be like $370. I don't know what's happening with taxes these days at all. It's just it's very deflated, and I'm not sure if Not a Perfume genre is as sellable in the premium luxury segment as they think it is. I can definitely tell you that if you're coming not from the fashion world, or you're not some heiress to a state, like a state that is 5 centuries old, and then if you're not looking for a decent, respectable, dignified gift to your 84-year-old grandma that can barely smell anything, but you would prefer her to smell nicer, you know what I mean? Then yes. But if you're coming from the point of olfactory design, if that's the route that took you to Celine fragrances, this is going to be a bit of like an awkward, crickets type of moment. The next one, Saint-Germain-Des-Prés. And this one conceptually is delightful. Let's see if it really delivers on the technicalities and perceptive olfactory impression. So this goes even deeper into the cultural Parisian history. So there is an iconic left bank neighborhood in Paris that's called Saint-Germain-Des-Prés. And this is where the old, centuries-old heritage architecture meets the energy of students, intellectuals, artists. This is essentially a love letter to that eternal, arrogant, effortlessly chic, damn those youth of the left bank. So, when we are looking at the pyramid, I'm going to disappoint so many. It's such a great idea. And yet you get the most typical piercing, scratchy neroli, essentially. And it's interesting. I find that a lot of fragrances that try to reference Parisian chic, they do fall into the neroli genre. There is always neroli there. Not always, but often. There's something about neroli-centric scents that evokes a lot of memories or associations with Paris, I noticed. But it's just not, there's nothing to this neroli. I had a whole expose on neroli as a genre in the perfumery. If you watched it, you know my point of view, that neroli is to fragrance design as a white t-shirt to fashion. It is a testament of genuine love for creativity and conceptually contorted design to create an ultra luxury white t-shirt. That said, we all have a favorite one, right? It is always such a staple and such an incredible pleasure to have a well-made white t-shirt that fits you just like you want it, be it oversized, be it stretchy and like fits your curves, be it v-neck, be it scoop neck, be it whatever you want it to look like. Shorter, longer, more tight, more loose, thinner or thicker cotton. Everybody has a favorite one, and for our favorite one that we tend to wear until it's just unhygienic to wear it out because white doesn't last that long. We all have a favorite one, and we want like a 5 or like 10 copies of that duplicate so we can wear that particular cotton brand forever, to make sure that, when it goes out of, like when the brand goes out of business or they start making that one, that we're well stocked into our retirement with that particular white t-shirt. So that's the neroli sense in a nutshell. Everybody has to find their favorite one, and to you that neroli will be the most, the best, that, and yet it will be nearly undescribable to everyone else. Why this one? All neroli scents smell the same, but there will be one that you will just have to have. So, what can I say? It's a bitter neroli. that is wrapped with traces of lipsticky iris accord, like old lipstick smell. And that's about it. It's way sweeter than the true Neroli cologne should be, but it's not sweet enough to be considered a floral or a gourmand by any stretch of imagination. I would heavily recommend you try it and wear it for quite some time before you commit to it, because one thing is buying a tailored blazer that is severely overpriced and maybe wearing it twice, but wearing it to such an occasion that just makes an impression. And I'm thinking about Reptile here, though I would wear it all the time. I have no shame. And quite another to pay 5,000 times the price for a white t-shirt only to discover that there's nothing there. You know what I mean? It's better be the one Neroli that you want to wear, because otherwise it's just yet another Neroli. I always get confused about the names of perfumes when there is an equivalent name in English language, but it's a French brand. So it's either Parade or Parade. All right? Got it? Okay. Parade. Talking of Neroli, this is another one. But this time sweetened, truly white floral bouquet. This is the one, if I was making bets on which Celine fragrance you would most likely to receive as a gift from a suitor, you know what I mean? Guys love florals like this. These like sweetened, honeyed florals. It's not burnt sugar. It's not La Vie Bellish or Angel Mugler. Actually, a lot of men don't like them. Keep that in mind. Guys like well-rounded vanillas and honeyed florals. Something just comforting, like a warm hug with a follow-up kiss. So here we have they devoted to the codified ritual of a male sartorial appearance. To me, this is a brunch date on a warm September Sunday afternoon. This is like this harvest sunny afternoon. It's warm but not too hot. It's sweetened but not too gourmand. This is just a very happy, sunny type of Neroli. So we have here Bergamot Neroli Vetiver Musk Oak Motes. Why is this dedicated to dandies from 19th century is a forever mystery to me. As far as I know, the dandy culture, the secret signaling, was supposed to be then taking us to a carnation territory. But similarly, back in the day, there were not that many perfume ingredients that were workable. So most of perfumes would eventually take you to a green patchouli territory anyway. That was just the restrictions, the limitations of perfume making at the time. What does flamboyantly sweet white floral with Neroli has to do with this? I have no idea. Like, to me, the imagery and the olfactory design have nothing. This is as heterosexual to me as it gets. Not that the guy can't wear sweet, honeyed florals. Absolutely. But we were talking about perceptual cliches. These Lancôme Poème, all these white floral bouquets, some are tuberosy, some are more jasmine, some are like more subtle and freesia-like. This is a beautiful and happy white floral that eventually dries into oak moss. Oak moss by itself, yes, it's a very androgynous, very gender fluid type of accord. But the way that it starts, anyone can wear it, as I said, but it would not be the first thing I would think of if I was looking for aesthetic or cultural reference. Parade has the necessary silage and longevity. I would put it in as a top 2 after Reptile. After the Gator of the fragrance line, because the Gator is my favorite. But the second one would be Parade. However, that is its downfall. It's user-friendly, it's flamboyant, it's bright, it's happy, it's easy to explain and enjoy, and therefore smells like 1,000 other beautiful but much cheaper versions. Latin Lover by Carnet Barcelona, even the aforementioned Lancôme Poème, and even classical Lalique by Lalique. There's so many of these fruity, honeyed white florals. The only thing that sets this apart is the typical dry, powdery oak moss plus bookish powdery iris dry down. But you have to wait for it. And is that worth the price tag? I'm not sure. This one, I would say yes as a gift, and no if you're an olfactory enthusiast. It's good. It's good stuff, but it's redundant in the bigger world, in the bigger context of olfactory design. And the next one is Rimbaud. Arthur Rimbaud is, it's a very, as far as I've been seeing in the relics of French culture, it's one of those enfants terribles of poetry. So he is pretty much, if what I presume Kurt Cobain is to rock music, that is Arthur Rimbaud to French poetry. So he, at least according to the critics, he was writing all this groundbreaking surrealist poetry, and then at the age of 21 he decided to, been there, done that, abandoned all of it. And this is the fragrance that is nowhere to be found. So I presume it's been discontinued and potentially has a collectible value, not only because it has been discontinued, but because this particular scent by Celine is the most quintessential, cultural, soulful heart of what Hedi Slimane meant and envisioned for Celine as a brand. So Hedi Slimane was obsessed with Arthur Rimbaud, and this probably is the flagman, the fragrance that defines the line in his view. And I think I get why, because here I get very heated up, spiced up version of this DNA accord of iris, oak moss, but it's somehow like it's heated, it's simmering. And when you look at the pyramid, what gives us this hot and simmer effect is lavender. Lavender can give you this dry, soothing, and yet refreshing feel at the same time. Lavender and mint sit close in creating that effect. And you know what it made me think of? It made me think of Jiki by Guerlain. Though I'm so in love with the iris plus oak moss DNA of Celine at this point, 1 year later, it really grew on me, that I dare say, if you are looking for the most luxurious, the most haute couture lavender, that might be it. Also, if we're talking about spending big bucks, getting the fragrance that is the soul, the heart, the most dense, quintessential essence of everything that Hedi Slimane stands for in Celine universe, Rimbaud is it. If we remove all of that context, if you have Jiki, if you love Jiki, you're gonna be fine. My two absolute must-have lavenders that I think are both discontinued is you can find this super cheap or not at all. This is Burberry Brit Rhythm. To me, this is just as delightful, chic, intellectual, and a little bit more demure, a little bit more of a kissing the neck type of a lavender. I love this stuff. And the most olfactory, thinly weaved, the most beautifully constructed Highland lavender to me is Penhaligon's Lavandula, which I think is also discontinued. But since I have 2 bottles, it's, to me, this is enough lavender to last me a lifetime. So to me, Rimbaud is more of a watch out as a collectible item. If I can find it secondhand for a decent price, I might. I just might. If you are a fashion fiend, if you're a fashionista and you love Celine and you love the history of fashion and you like diving deeper and you like to be part of the heritage and the history, Rimbaud, Celine, it's where it's at. That said, that might be not the most interesting or unique perfume in their line. So keep that in mind. Now, Cologne Française. This is the 3rd Neroli by Celine. They are obsessed with French, and specifically Parisian, are obsessed with Neroli. I'm sure I'm like one Google search away from figuring out why. Okay, so Cologne Française is this like deceitful, cheeky way to present to you what you associate with cologne, which is fresh, citrusy, sparkly, maybe a little bit bitter, sour, bitter, fresh. But it is meant to play on dissonant accords. The top note, redolent with the addictive mellowness of Neroli and the sensuous bite of fig tree. Then the elegance of a veiled powdery iris and the tender patina of tree moss. Okay, so same DNA, powdery iris, moss accords, and think of it as molecular accords. They have this very dry, nuanced, quiet but gripping nature to them. I love molecular oak moss. I love molecular iris. However, it also has, to me, some dirty, oily hair situation going on. It definitely has certain dissonance, but not because of powderiness versus Neroli. It has this sharp, scratchy freshness of Neroli against unwashed hair. Like imagine if you didn't wash it for a week. It's this kind of like sebumi type of a feel. Neroli sometimes has that effect, but I would more assign it to maybe some animalic accords or ingredients, maybe even petitgrain accord plus Neroli. Usually Neroli by itself is not heavy enough, is not animalic enough to produce such a effect, even though arguably, well, I guess if there is some like jasminoid, like floral animalic components, that can happen, but none of that is mentioned here. To me, this is like oily, unwashed, sebumi hair smell plus Neroli, and that's about it. Not my favorite. And at this point, let's kill the wonder, as John Oliver used to say it. Why are French perfumers go for Neroli every time when they reference Paris or French culture? I'm sure it's again about Ludovic, what was it, like the King of the Sun. I'm sure it's again about French courts and having no running water. I'm dreading what I'm about to read. Okay, come on. It's refining the focus. Can Gemini? I'll let you ground your hallucinations. We'll wait. We'll wait. Slow thinking, thought a long time. All right. You have hit on one of the most ingrained tropes in perfumery. Whether a house wants to bottle Parisian elegance, Neroli is almost always the chosen vehicle. Let's see. I need references. I need links. While Eau de Cologne originated in Germany, hence the place, Cologne, it was violently adopted by the French royal courts. Here we go. It's again Napoleon. It's again royal courts. Okay. So they were obsessed with it, reportedly using up to 60 bottles of Neroli heavy cologne a month to stay fresh during military camps. Yeah, I knew it. Unhygienic, perverted, plus Neroli. Here comes your Parisian chic. That's all you need to know. Okay, we're done. I don't need to read anymore. There's enough of creepy, weird shit about French culture already. Let's stop there. Okay, I need like a cultural reset. So the last one is going to be Eau de Californie. We're moving coast. We're crossing the ocean at this point. We need a bit of a break from the Parisian nightclubs. Okay, the celebration of the Californian desert-like floral freshness. I gotta say, I did live in California for a long while, and there's a place that's called Half Moon Bay, and there are, I think it's bergamot trees that grow there. And I actually experienced smelling them in a misty, hazy morning on one random weekend. And that was such an unforgettable, soft, dreamy feeling that I've been chasing my favorite bergamot scent ever since. And I found a few really good ones. So this takes me back to Half Moon Bay in California. All right, let's see what illusions are we meant to catch when we wear Eau de Californie. An acoustic and solar perfume in tribute to California, the memory of Palo Santo, that magical essence of wood with fresh, smoky and creamy facets. Agreed. Bergamot, white orris butter, Palo Santo, accord, tree moss and patchouli. A strong contender, if you're a big fan of bergamot, and Palo Santo in general. This is what I would love to call a cologne. It's not technically a cologne, but to me that's what colognes ought to be. I'm not sure. I'm going to say a cliche. Colognes are hard to justify at the price tag of over $300. I'm just going to preface it. That said, if not for the price tag, I would be buying myself a bottle. This, to me, is the quintessential morning perfume. It's the perfect design of a morning fragrance as I like them. I'm not a big fan of sparkly, prickly, very lemony scents. I'm not a big fan of petitgrain. I'm not a big fan of prominent neroli, to be honest. There is a time and place for neroli, but not really that much in my life. I clearly would not do well during the military campaigns of Napoleon. But this is the cologne for Americans. I wish every American was wearing this cologne. Oh, those would be the days. Maybe people would be nicer then. Maybe there would be less of what's happening right now. We'll never know. Because this has to be more popular than it is. But it should cost $30. It should not cost $300. I'm just saying. It's very hard to justify $300, spend $300 for what's essentially fresh bergamot perfume. If you're really, really crazy about limey bergamot scents, right? Like with these factions that is minty bergamot, but it doesn't transition to heavier citruses, Bigarade Concentrate, it's where it's at. It's just that is worth every penny, even if you buy it full price, if you're looking for that type of a genre, a representation of that genre. Here, I love it. It's lovely. It's my cup of tea all the way. But I'm not gonna buy it. That's ridiculous. But I have to say I love it. It's not a compliment getter. It's not a beast mode. It doesn't even have that much of a oomph of sillage, like it doesn't transfer as much, even though it's a light citrusy bergamot scent. It's just like that misty Saturday morning in Half Moon Bay. It's just beautiful. It gives you this fresh, wet, hazy, dry, woody feeling. It's like Scottish Highlands aesthetic trend of 2026 by Pinterest data science team. It's beautiful. It's breathable. It's elegant. But it's a hard sell for the price tag. A rare event happened with Celine Couture fragrance line. They updated it. They added a new fragrance called Juju. And I haven't tried it, so it's just an honorary mention. If any of you tried it, let me know what you think. I just looked at it and realized I'm not going to hunt it down because here are my thoughts on it. They're only going to start selling it on March 4th, right? It's super new. So it's going to be tough to get samples. I don't have Celine Boutique near me. It's a bit of a barrier for entry. But then I start looking at the description. And one thing that's a bit of a letdown, at this point, they're beating the dead horse. They again use the same words and the same patterns and the same cultural codes. Parisienne, eternal Parisienne, sported by 60s icons. Been there, done that. We witnessed at least half of the collection has already exploited that theme and those aesthetic codes. And then we get into the actual pyramid of what the olfactory design is, and it's accords of benzoin, tonka bean, patchouli, labdanum, vanilla musk, so caramel undertones, amber composition. There is a legion of caramelly amber perfumes, a legion, unless it's the most unusual combination of facets. This is not going to be as juicy and bright as some of our designer creations of that genre. Think some of the Dolce & Gabbanas or Armani's You Only You, or Dolce & Gabbana The One, even Yves Saint Laurent Libre, even though it's supposed to be fougère, it's a gourmand. The lavender there is unrecognizable. So there are like a lot of these like sweet caramelly, Olympia Paco Rabanne. There's so many of them. So many of them. There's so many of them cheap, middle class, mid-range, up like the high street. To pay for caramelly, ambery, skin tight nude perfume, $350, or what it's gonna be like with the tax, please, excuse me, not me. So I'm curious if you tried it, if you got it in the PR, if you got it in samples, if you managed to stop by the boutique and smell it. I don't know if they even have any testers. Let me know what you think, but I am like confidently skipping this one. It's been long awaited update. Luckily, they haven't been following Tom Ford formula. They haven't been releasing like 50 perfumes every year. Respect for that. But when we're waiting with with a bated breath, so to speak, for a new release from Celine Haute Couture Olfactory Arts line, we expect something a little bit more unique than a caramel amber. That said, Time will show. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this long cultural perception heavy expose on Celine fashion code, and especially its heritage and its the space that it's carving for itself in olfactory arts world. I hope that you'll share with me and the rest of the community, the rest of the crew, what you thought of those perfumes. As I said, my opinion was very non-linear. Some of them grew on me, some of them I actually lost interest in, and some of them opened and closed some cultural questions that I wasn't aware of were that intriguing. To summarize, if you're going into it from an olfactory community, right, like a perfume lovers lens, there are some that are truly unique and have all the right technical characteristics just the same. So over $300 price tag, unfortunately, rarely surprises anyone. So for some people, it will be no problemo to spend that money on a perfume that's truly cool, unique. That said, the collector's kind will most likely be interested in Rimbaud, and those who go by uniqueness of the blend, I would heavily recommend you try Reptile. Those who are into compliment getters will most likely be satisfied with Parade and Black Tie. And there are like a lot of them in between that are also quite wearable. That said, I'm not sure that they're that they're unique enough to put aside tens of thousands of other niche creations and spend your hard-earned money on that. That's just my opinion. I'm eager to hear yours. Thank you so much for watching. If you like and subscribe, that will make my day. It's really helpful for channels like mine that are not super big. Every like counts, every share counts, every comment is very, very precious. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.